Welcome to Irishwebtv.com. My name is Aine Duffy, and today I've got a very interesting talk in the studio today. We're going to talk about TraVision. Yes, TraVision. And to tell me all about that is Irish traveller man Bernard Sweeney. Good morning, Bernard.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me on.
You are most welcome. TraVision, I guess that says what it says on the tin. TraVision, Traveller Television. Now, you have headed up your own traveller media group, and this is where this is all coming from. You've had one programme already.
Yeah, absolutely. TraVision is traveller vision, but even with that, it's a platform, it's a structure, it's a business type model. It is not exclusively for travellers, it's open to all communities. It has to be open to all communities.
And as we said just before we started to talk, it's the first ever indigenous working class TV in Ireland. That's where you're working from.
I say the first indigenous TV because we have a distinct culture, not a distinct anything else, but culture. And our culture stems from hundreds, even thousands of years on this island, long before the British ever came along. We still have a lot of elements of that, and sometimes I find it really interesting and exciting when I see settled people making gatherings and they're talking about Brehon law, and they romanticise about it and they reflect about it, which is wonderful. I got more and more into history, and I like settled people now because I love their history. But when I be looking at it, I'm saying, yeah, we were doing that last week. Yep, that's quite normal for our community right in this day and age. So there is that kind of crossover now, which I'm starting to learn more and more about. That's really exciting stuff.
Okay, so you're going to use TraVision, which I think that's a very clever name, Traveller Television. You're going to use that as a platform to talk about traveller issues, to talk about settled people issues, to talk about the sort of integration of both in society. Now, just recently, in the last couple of years, travellers have been made a recognised ethnic minority.
Ethnicity, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a good thing, but you're still not very pleased about that.
No. Peter Casey would fully agree that it's not a good thing. It's not that it's not a good thing. At a personal level, for self-belief and confidence for travellers,
it's given you status which you felt you hadn't got before, so that has to be good.
It hasn't given us status, no, it hasn't. It has given us recognition, recognising that, oh, sugar, we got it all wrong. You are actually indigenous. You are actually hundreds and thousands of years old culture. We got it so wrong. So we are going to recognise you now as an indigenous people, but we're going to do absolutely nothing else for you. No legal protection, because we need legal protection. And if you look at all the statistics where travellers are reflected on that, it's high levels of unemployment, it's a high infant mortality rate, there's men and women dying 10 and 15 years younger than the settled community. Now, people can say that's a social construct and that needs to be looked at, but it's also, I believe, a race structure. Well, when I say race, it's not that I believe people are different races. It's the concept of racism itself and where that construct.
Oh, we'll go into that, Bernard. We'll go into that, and we'll talk about the difference between a traveller and a settler, which a lot of people out there are not very au fait about. But again, just to reiterate what TraVision is about, you're going to use this as a platform, and you're going to, as you say, these things need to be, and as Peter Casey said as well, to be fair to him, these things need to be out in the open, are everybody's thoughts and feelings and discussed. And that has not happened till now. Or nobody knows anything about it if it has, but it's not happening. And perhaps this is what TraVision hopes to do. But before we get to talk more about TraVision, I'd like to talk about Bernard Sweeney, Irish traveller.
You can, most certainly talk. And I'll be more than accompanied to talk to you about Bernard
Sweeney.
One thing. Just before we do talk about Bernard Sweeney, just go back a fraction about the whole Peter Casey and about this talk needs to have. Absolutely. There's always room for dialogue and communication and conversation.
Well, this is what you're going to use TraVision for,
absolutely.
Isn't it?
And I would personally invite Peter Casey on to my show, or any show for that matter. It would be me, you, and an historian. And I promise you, you're right about some things. I don't believe travellers are different from settled community. You're absolutely right about that. I believe that settled community is actually different from travellers. That's the difference. But if you were to come on, I promise you, it's not about put you down, or keep you down. It's about working together, because I think you're key to something else, and that's talking about the whole situation of colonisation in this country.
Okay, well said. You'll talk to Peter. Actually, I watched your first programme that you've put out on TraVision, and I was very interested to see Vincent Brown there on your forum, or one of your guests.
He's one of my biggest heroes.
Yeah, mine as well. And fair play to you, got chatting to him. So he's claiming some settler, some traveller.
He's not. No,
Is he not?
I was taking the mickey that time.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, I was just winding people up. But he had a huge interest, not just in travellers, but in social issues in general. And that's what makes him one of the most noticeable journalists this country has ever had. And I would compare him to like people like Noam Chomsky. I would even compare him to people like, on an unpolitical scale, someone like James Connolly. Quite visionary, quite collective, quite understanding, and had a broad sense of where we could all go together instead of this infighting.
Very interesting. I'll watch that again with that concept in mind. Okay, but I was trying to get back to Bernard Sweeney, the traveller man. You're unique in that you're setting up that this is a very forward-thinking thing that you are doing. Absolutely brilliant. And let's get back to a young Bernard Sweeney. Like, how did you find education? You're 44 years of age now. Yeah. So how did you find education? How did you get through education? Was it for you? What's the story?
Absolutely not. It wasn't for me. And at a very young age, I think I was about 5 or 6 years old, the very first school I went to. Now I can visualise it now when I'm 44, but obviously if I went back there, it would look nothing like that. Because it was this big, massive building, and 2 big doors opened. And this teacher, who looked like about 8 foot tall, came out and brought me in. And that very first moment, everybody in that classroom looked different. They looked, of course, they were in uniforms, that's why they looked all the same. But even that part, it reminded me later on in life when I watched a movie called The Village of the Damned. And these blonde-head, body-snatched kids, aliens, were walking around, and they all looked the same and thought the same and behaved the same. And that was the comparison I could make.
You must have been petrified.
Oh, when my mother and father were coming in the van, I would have jumped out through the window to get in, and we often did. We often tried to crawl into the back of the van. It was like, I don't want to go in there. And of course, for the settled community, we were different. Because now they were looking like some kind of outcast type people. Of course, we might have been a bit rough and ready at the time and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was my first experience.
But you were different to them.
Yeah, well, I wasn't.
You know,
they were different
it wasn't
from me.
A bad way of looking at you different. You were different to them.
No, I know, but they were different from us.
Yeah, so it works both ways.
In your community and your sort of mentality and psychology and all that, is that you live a very normal life. You've been living a very normal life for a very long time, and that is normal to you. We've been on a sort of parallel distinction of culture, shared history, but distinction nevertheless. And what we perceive to be normal, we wouldn't call normal what happens in the settled community, and vice versa.
Well, that's amazing insight into that, and I'm glad people out there will be hearing your take on that. Good stuff. Now, going through the rest of your life, as you say, education wasn't for you. It was probably a very bad start. No creche or anything like that. Straight into big school. Very scary for you. How did you find teenager years? And
well, let me tell you one more thing about the education, and this might be a decent comparison to a lot of people that might understand it differently. We were made to feel the same way in an education system as how the settled were a long time ago. When they broke down the clan system, when they broke down agriculture and all of this kind of stuff, they forced an education that became normal then for them. But yeah, there was always that conflict. I didn't fit in with the education system because it did not reflect anything about my community, my culture. It did when I read about the history. It did when I read Phil McCool with the dog, because I had a dog and I used to go hunting. So I could relate to all that kind of stuff. But yeah, go on, sorry.
Okay, then going through your life, you're just talking snippets before. You had a hard life. You had knocks and downs. You got married, and you're very unusual that you're actually a divorced traveller. That's unusual.
Yeah, look, my life has been quite a journey like most people, and even at a very young age, I really did have a visualisation of a realisation at some point in my life that the world wasn't right. Not because I came from the community I came from, which was hostile, violent at times. Just the world in general. Settled people weren't right. Travellers weren't right. There's something not right about the whole process.
Did that come from within, or was it around you the not right, or was the not right within?
This is kind of one of those things where you say something and then a psychologist or a psychiatrist would have a field day with it. And they'd say, well, it stemmed from a trauma at such a point in the life. And all that kind of stuff. Which, there could be elements of that. But nevertheless, I felt it. I felt it now much in recent years as I once did when I was younger, and a lot came back to me when I was younger, because I feel the same way now, that I genuinely have a vision that is without greed, without corruption, without money. And when I say without money, I don't want the need for money. A genuine base where I honestly believe that when the Irish people get talking, and when we share our travel history with the settled history, they'll see not a divergence, but a uniting of one people that once were, and diverged through interventions through British colonisation.
It's taken a long, hard road to get you to the very sensible, clued-in person you are now. You had your own demons and your own battles.
Absolutely.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, one, I grew up in an identity crisis at a very early age. I was confused because I tried everything I could try to be a settled person. I tried to talk like settled people, act like settled people, behave like settled people. This was very young teenage years.
You wanted to blend in?
I wanted to get into places. I didn't want to be put out of places. So the only way I could do that was to mimic the people that were going into the places. So we dropped anything kind of what might be associated with traveller culture. And this happens right today, with particularly with a lot of young traveller women and hairdressers, where they might wear certain jewellery or certain fashion, and they try to hide everything that is to be a traveller to fit in. And again, with Irish settled, Catholic, Protestant, Irish, English. And that's the system that was created.
Okay, so this led to a great unhappiness within yourself. And you had a battle, admittedly, so you'd had a battle with alcohol, and you dabbled in drugs as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, they were hard times, but you came out of it. Did you seek help? Did you reach an all-time low where you had to get help?
Well, like anyone in this situation would, and I was quite stubborn because I didn't want to share my family, I didn't want to share my kids.
But you were shaming them being an alcoholic and abusing drugs.
Well, sometimes, and I could hide that pretty well. It wasn't a blatant...
So you were in turmoil?
I was in turmoil.
Okay, what turned the key? What turned you around?
It took a bit of a process, and I think again it started from a very young early age, because I promised my grandfather that he would never have the life, and when I get older I would look after him forever. Of course I was quite young at the time. He was murdered in 1988, and that didn't materialise for obvious reasons. I promised my mother she would never have to cry, she would never have to be treated or walked out of a shop or put out of a shop in her life again. Unfortunately she died with a massive stroke when she was 48. So
that is an issue we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, so those things, again, that people can
traveller people do die younger.
Oh, unbelievably so. So there is that sequence of events, and this is not, I'm not unique in this. I mean, I know families that have lost several family members to suicide. I have lost entire families to fires, to prone to they're living in the worst of health.
They are the hard circumstances which traveller people live under. Now, we were talking about you and your addictions and how you turned around.
I'm trying to avoid them. I'm not, but
no, you're not trying to avoid,
yeah.
But you're good. And I'd like you to tell the story now that you're into mindfulness and you've had a spiritual, maybe not the word spiritual, but you have an awakening. And you are, in fact, carrying out your dream now of changing the life. Maybe the promise to your grandfather and the promise to your mother now will somehow come true because of what you're doing with TraVision, encouraging these talks between different people and different communities and making, as I can see from now, from this point here talking to you, making the settled folk who are the majority understand why travellers behave and feel the way they do towards the settled folk, because of the way we treat them. It's a revolving door system. It works both ways. And I lived in a housing...
Well, just both ways, and again, I'll keep interjection, just because I think we need to always bring a kind of a balance to it. When people say it needs to work both ways, and sometimes we hear a lot of politicians say, travellers need to meet us halfways. You're talking about 50,000 people.
Is that not fair enough?
But if you think about this, you're talking about...
We're not talking numbers, we're just talking ideas.
Yeah, okay, but even the idea that someone can meet you anywhere when they've been so suppressed, oppressed, socially excluded, have no representation in politics.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, get over this now. Come on, get over this. You're going to do this with TraVision.
I'll tell you what.
Get over this. You're going to get over that.
I'll tell you what.
You're going to do this with TraVision.
Yeah,
okay?
This is with TraVision. I'm trying to create this balance, is that the only way that we're ever going to move forward is if we go back just a little bit, or go back as far as we need to go into the past and find out the similarities and the patterns from one century, one decade to another.
How are you going to inform traveller folk and settled folk about that?
Oh, believe it or not, I just happened to find him there. He's a wonderful human being. His name is Dylan Foley, and I keep calling him Dylan on the podcast. He's a member of the settled community, a very, very intelligent lad, and well equipped on ancient Irish, old Irish historian, he's an archaeologist, and it's through our conversations that there was like Christmas lights going off. Now we could be feeding each other's egos and hopefully just patching things in to make it look wonderful, but it's not. Everything he's telling me and everything I say, well, yeah, actually our people do that. I said, this is what they used to do thousands of years ago, or hundreds of years ago, or whatever it might be. So the similarities there, so we have that link. Peter Casey is the prime example of someone battling with himself, with the logical evidence, the scientific evidence, everything that can be presented to him. He's at a huge conflict because he cannot, for the life of him, understand how this is, how this could be. So I think us three guys, and that's not because we're guys, it's just because I believe I've met a lot of good people in my life, and I'll go back to that in a minute, but us three could open up a complete different perspective that was never been touched on. And we could actually address racism in its full context.
Racism. Well, that's a long story. That's a really big debate. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about...
Well, just maybe about because I want to say this now, I suppose, when I was on the issue of the drugs and the alcohol, the whole lot. I went through turmoil. I had been since I was a child. I was angry with the world, so on and so forth. If it had not been for certain people in my life, particularly two travel women who I had met in my life, I know I wouldn't be here talking to you, and that's just reality. Okay. Because I got to that point. How it changed, again, was a traveller woman introduced me to mindfulness. And it's not because, it's not a religious thing. It's just a way to understand your own brain, to regulate the thoughts, to slow it down and make sense of the world, or the best you can. So a lot of that went on with me. And although I do have elements of anger, and I admit, I wouldn't say, thank God I never got bitter. But I was angry in life. I was angry at people. I didn't like settled people. I mean, at first I wanted to be like a settled person to avoid all the discrimination. Then I blamed all the settled people. Then I blamed travellers for it, and I was blaming this person, that person. But now, the more I get later on in life, that was at a very young age, but later in life, I have a very, very much broader sense of the world.
How do you feel now, Bernard? Do you feel that going forward, you are strong enough to battle your not to battle, but to put your ideas, to do the work you want to do? Do you feel strong enough to do that now?
I honestly, truly feel...
You never slip back?
No, I can't. I know where I'm at.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about, we're going to end up about the wonderful traveller culture. And we'll talk about, they were great craftsmen in their days. They could make anything out of a tin.
And women.
And women. Good point. Wonderful craftsmanship. Brilliant musicians. We'll talk about Packer Dunn. You've got Thomas McCarthy, Finbar Fury. Wonderful musicians that would have carried the tradition of music all down through the families, and that tradition is hundreds of years old. Some of those tunes carried down, never lost its flavour because it's handed from one to one. Well, that's the brilliance of the traveller community, and that's not in danger of being lost, like the way we lose things in the settled community. Well, that's good, and maybe you want to hold on to those points as well.
Well, look, to be quite honest, if you think about it, when the whole conquest started and the whole settlement, people, Normans come in, people came from Scotland, so the settled community themselves are quite a diverse genetic people. I mean, they've a multitude of different backgrounds. But when that was going on here, I think the music was key to us, because when the settlement was happening, travellers were the only people who were nomadic. So it was travellers were bringing the music from one village to another. They either picked up songs, learned songs, brought songs, tunes. And one of the old things we used to do, even within our own community, if there was two clangs, would it be two surnames, say Sweeney and somebody else, and going back many years, if there was friction, they would write letters, or there wouldn't be letters, they'd be writing songs to each other, but insulting them at the same time. And then they'd get that and they'd sing it out, and somebody else would write something back, and a lot of the songs like that.
Okay, yeah, and it's great to hear those songs. Yeah. Okay, we've come to the end of our little chat here today. To get back to TraVision, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you are fulfilling the promises you made to maybe your grandfather and your mother in making a better life for travellers. And TraVision is a great innovative idea. Fair play to you. It's a media group. You do podcasts and everything, and fair play to you. And the way to go with that, and stay strong with it. Do you want to say one last thing about TraVision?
TraVision is for every single person. It's a voice for the voiceless, and it's a platform for people that have never been or had been afforded an opportunity to have a platform. It's for all communities, for settled, it's for travellers, and just about everybody else. The most important thing about TraVision, this is one thing that I'm assured is implemented right through every platform, every project, that it's fundamentally based not just on equality and equal opportunities, but positive outcomes, equal outcomes. The outcomes are far more important than the project or anything else at the beginning.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Just slightly one more thing. Would you please do me a huge favour and go on to GoFundMe TraVision, because I really need some donations. I'm unfunded at the time, or non-funded at the moment. So any donation would be really, really appreciated.
Yeah, and we reiterate that. A name to watch out for, Bernard Sweeney, Irish traveller man, and go fund TraVision. Give this guy the opportunity to make his dream come true for his community. Thank you for watching Irishwebtv. My name is Aine Duffy, and do look out for TraVision.